Imagine holding a small piece of American history in the palm of your hand, a coin so ordinary in appearance, yet so deeply connected to the lives of millions of people across the nation. The 1977 one dime, known to collectors as the Roosevelt dime, is far more than just 10 cents. It is a reflection of an era shaped by politics, culture, and economics. And it carries with it a story that spans decades and reaches back even further to the origins of American coinage itself. To understand the 1977 dime, we must travel back to the aftermath of World War II, when the United States sought to honor one of its most iconic leaders, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who guided the country through the Great Depression and the Second World War. The dime was chosen for this tribute because of Roosevelt's lifelong association with the March of Dimes, a campaign to fight polio, the disease that he himself battled during his life. And in 1946, just a year after his death, the Roosevelt dime entered circulation, replacing the Mercury dime that had been in use since 1916. By 1977, the dime had already been circulating for more than 3 decades, but it continued to be a vital part of everyday American life. However, the dime struck in this year stand out for several reasons tied both to history and to numismatics. When we examine the 1977 dime, we must first look at its design on the obverse. The familiar portrait of Roosevelt created by John Arsenault remains bold and dignified, with his profile facing left, his name subtly tied to the principles of courage, leadership, and perseverance surrounding his portrait. We see the inscriptions "Liberty and God We Trust," the date 1977, and the small mint mark if the coin was produced at Denver or San Francisco. While Philadelphia coins of this year were struck without a mint mark, the reverse continues the theme of national pride, with the torch of liberty flanked by an olive branch on one side, representing peace, and an oak branch on the other, symbolizing strength and independence. The motto, Pluribus Unum, from many one, ties the coin to the larger American identity. Now, to truly understand the 1977 dime, we must place it in its historical and economic context. The 1970s were a turbulent time in the United States. The country had just come through the Vietnam War. Watergate had shaken public confidence, inflation was rising, and the Cold War still defined much of global politics. In this atmosphere, every element of daily life, including money, took on additional meaning. Though the dime may seem small, its value to everyday Americans was undeniable. In 1977, a dime could still purchase small necessities such as a payphone call, a newspaper, or a handful of candy in vending machines. But more importantly, the dime remained a symbol of stability in a period of uncertainty. In terms of minting, the 1977 dime was produced at 3 different locations: the Philadelphia Mint, which issued coins without a mint mark; the Denver Mint, marked with a small d; and the San Francisco Mint, which struck proof coins with an S mint mark. These mint marks play an important role for collectors because each mint had its own mintage numbers, quality, and strike differences. In Philadelphia, over 867 million dimes were produced, while Denver contributed more than 376 million, and San Francisco struck nearly 325 million proof coins. The massive numbers from Philadelphia and Denver ensured that these coins circulated widely across the country, meaning millions of Americans touched and used these very dimes in their daily lives. For numismatists and collectors, though the 1977 dime is often valued not just for its historical context, but also for its condition while circulated, examples remain extremely common. Uncirculated or mint state coins can command higher interest, and proof issues from San Francisco are particularly sought after because of their sharp strikes and mirror-like finishes. Errors and varieties also add depth to the story of the 1977 dime. During mass production, mistakes occurred that today fascinate collectors: doubled dies, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other striking anomalies make these coins rare and sometimes very valuable in the numismatic market. These errors transform what might seem like an ordinary dime into a prize collectible worth for more than its face value. Yet, the true value of the 1977 dime cannot be measured solely in dollars and cents. Instead, it lies in the way the coin connects us to a moment in time. In 1977, Jimmy Carter, had just been inaugurated as president. The American economy faced stagflation and social change was sweeping the nation, and while newspapers covered global conflicts, political struggles, and cultural milestones, Americans still reached into their pockets each day and found coins like the 1977 dime. It is through this ordinary act of commerce that history and daily life intersect. The story of this coin is also tied to the evolution of American coinage. By 1977, silver had long been removed from circulating dimes with the shift to a copper-nickel-clad composition. Beginning in 1965, due to the rising cost of silver, what once was a precious metal coin had now become a token of modern economics and inflation. This transition reflects the changing nature of money itself, and by studying the 1977 dime we witness the broader transformation of currency in the modern world. For collectors and historians alike, this coin is a window into how design, artistry, and practicality meet in the minting process. The Roosevelt portrait chosen in 1946 remained unchanged by 1977, but subtle differences in dies and striking quality create a variety of coins that collectors enjoy studying in detail. The proof coins from San Francisco represent the mint's dedication to craftsmanship, with their sharp designs contrasting against frosted portraits that gleam in collectors' albums. Furthermore, the 1977 dime connects to the story of American numismatic tradition, stretching all the way back to the Coinage Act of 1792, which established the U.S. Mint and defined the denominations we still use today. Each coin is a descendant of that legislation, and the Roosevelt dime in particular reminds us of how coins are both works of art and tools of commerce. By exploring the 1977 dime, we find ourselves asking questions about value, rarity, and meaning. What makes one coin worth only 10 cents while another, struck in error, might sell for hundreds or even thousands? What does it say about society when a common dime becomes a collectible treasure? The answers to these questions reveal as much about human culture as they do about economics and metallurgy. As we expand this story into a longer exploration, we would look at the biographies of the designers, at the technologies used in the minting presses of the 1970s, at the metallurgical science behind copper-nickel-clad coinage, and at the shifting role of coinage in an era when paper currency, credit cards, and electronic payments were beginning to change the way Americans thought about money. This coin then becomes a gateway into larger conversations about art, history, economics, politics, and human experience, and that is why the 1977 dime remains far more than just a small piece of metal. It is an enduring artifact of American history. It speaks to us about leadership through the portrait of Roosevelt, about national ideals through the symbols of liberty, peace, and strength, and about the lives of everyday Americans who used it as part of their daily existence. And when collectors today hold a pristine proof from San Francisco, or stumble across an error coin that survived against all odds, they are not simply holding money. They are holding a story, legacy, and a bridge between past and present. And that is the true power of the 1977 dime. The year 1966 rests within one of the most transformative periods in American numismatic history, a time when the very essence of United States coinage was shifting, when the materials that had defined generations of coins were being replaced, and when the U.S. Mint was under immense pressure to keep coins circulating in the economy. Among all the coins produced during this turbulent era, the 1966 Roosevelt dime stands as a reflection of not just monetary necessity, but also the broader historical, economic, and cultural changes of mid-20th century America. To understand this coin, we must first step back into the years leading up to its creation. The dime itself had long been an essential part of U.S. currency, its history beginning with the draped bust design of the late 1700s, evolving through the seated Liberty and Barber series, and eventually the Mercury dime, which became one of the most beloved designs in American numismatics. But after the death of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1945, a decision was made to honor his memory by placing his portrait on the dime chosen. Because of his close association with the March of Dimes campaign to combat polio, which he himself had struggled with, the Roosevelt dime was Introduced in 1946, featuring John Arsenic's portrait of Roosevelt on the obverse and a torch flanked by an olive branch and oak branch on the reverse, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. For 2 decades the dime carried this design in silver. Composed of 90% silver and 10% copper, this was the standard for circulating dimes, quarters, and half dollars. But by the early 1960s, a storm was brewing. The rising price of silver and a national coin shortage forced Congress and the Mint to rethink coinage materials. The shortage grew so severe that people were hoarding silver coins, pulling them from circulation, believing their intrinsic metal value was worth more than their face value. Banks and businesses complained. Coin-operated machines were disrupted, and the American public became increasingly frustrated. President Lyndon B. Johnson addressed this crisis in 1965, and the Coinage Act of 1965 was passed, fundamentally reshaping American coinage. Silver would be removed from dimes and quarters, replaced with the clad composition of copper sandwiched between outer layers of copper nickel. The half dollar would retain a reduced 40% silver content for a time, but the dime and quarter lost silver entirely for the first time since their creation. This change was not welcomed by all collectors or the public. Many saw it as the end of a proud silver tradition, yet it was deemed necessary to stabilize the economy and keep coins available for everyday transactions. The 1965 Coinage Act also suspended mint marks for several years, including 1965, 1966, and 1967, as a way to discourage collectors from hoarding coins from specific mints. Thus, every 1966 dime, regardless of where it was minted, Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, bears no mint mark. This fact adds an extra layer of intrigue for modern collectors, since identifying where a 1966 dime was struck is impossible through the coin itself, and can only be speculated on through historical mintage records. In 1966, the Mint continued producing the Roosevelt dime in massive numbers. Over 1.3 billion were struck, a record figure meant to alleviate the national shortage. The coins were identical in design to the earlier silver Roosevelt dimes, but their composition had changed forever. They were now a copper nickel-clad coin, with an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving the coin a total weight of 27 grams with the diameter of 17.91 millimeters. Visually, these coins look similar to their silver predecessors, though experienced collectors could detect differences. The clad dimes had a slightly different color tone, with a more subdued luster compared to the brilliance of silver coins, and the edge of the dime revealed its copper core in a distinct reddish-brown stripe that made it clear the era of silver had ended. Still, these coins carried Roosevelt's proud portrait. His stern, yet optimistic profile gazing left a symbol of leadership during America's darkest days of the Great Depression and World War II. The reverse design remained unchanged, the torch, olive branch, and oak branch continuing to represent liberty, peace, and strength, 3 virtues Americans clung to during the turbulent 1960 seconds, as the Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, and cultural revolutions defined the decade. The 1966 dime thus serves as more than just pocket change. It is a tangible artifact of the economic realities and political decisions of the Johnson era. It tells the story of how America transitioned from silver coinage to modern clad coinage, and it reminds collectors today of the push and pull between tradition and necessity. From a numismatic perspective, the 1966 dime is both common and historically important. Because of its massive mintage, it is not rare in circulation, and most examples today carry only face value. However, its importance lies in its place in history, the very first full year of copper nickel-clad dime production. It is a cornerstone for anyone studying the transformation of United States coinage. Collectors often seek high-grade examples, especially those that survived decades without heavy circulation. Mint state coins graded Ms. 65 or higher are desirable, particularly those with strong luster and sharp details. The absence of mint marks during this period makes varieties more limited than in other years, but that very lack of mint marks has sparked fascination among hobbyists, as it was a unique decision in U.S. coinage history. Furthermore, special mint sets produced from 1965 to 1967 substituted for proof sets during this transitional period, and 1966 dimes from these sets are especially interesting. They were struck with higher quality standards than regular circulation coins, though not quite to the level of traditional proofs. These SMS dimes can be distinguished by their sharper strikes, smoother fields, and occasionally cameo contrast between frosted devices and mirrored backgrounds. Collectors often prize these SMS issues as a special subset of the Roosevelt dime series. The broader significance of the 1966 dime can also be understood by placing it in the continuum of American monetary history. The removal of silver not only reflected economic necessity, but also foreshadowed future changes as America steadily moved away from precious metals backing its currency. It was part of the gradual departure from the silver standard, culminating in the eventual abandonment of the gold standard under President Nixon in 1971. Thus, the small dime of 1966 carries within it echoes of much larger economic policies that reshaped global finance. Its story intertwines with inflation debates, currency stability, and the American struggle to balance tradition with innovation. As decades passed, the 1966 dime continued to circulate in vast numbers. By the 1970s and 1980 seconds, most Americans gave little thought to it. It was a common coin when used in vending machines, pay phones, laundromats, and countless small purchases. Yet beneath that ordinary exterior was a coin that told the story of a nation in transition. Today, as collectors study these coins, they not only appreciate their physical attributes, but also reflect on the sweeping historical currents they represent. To hold a 1966 dime is to hold a piece of the moment when silver ended in everyday coinage, when mint marks temporarily vanished, when America's economy adapted to the realities of rising metal prices, and when the image of Roosevelt continued to honor a president who had guided the country through crisis. In the world of numismatics, context is everything, and the 1966 Roosevelt dime provides one of the richest contexts in all of American coinage history. While it may not fetch extraordinary sums at auction compared to rarest or low mintage issues, its importance as a historical marker cannot be overstated. It stands as the everyday coin that symbolized extraordinary change, and for collectors and historians alike, it is a reminder that even the most common coin can tell a story that stretches across economics, politics, and culture, making the 1966 dime a cornerstone of understanding mid-20th century America. The Jefferson nickel of 1968 is more than just a 5-cent coin. It is a window into a period of great change in American history, both socially and economically. And when we hold one of these coins in our hands, we are not simply looking at a small piece of metal, but rather at a story that connects the United States Mint, the American people, and the turbulent times of the late 1960s. The coin itself continues the long-running design that began in 1938 when Felix Schlag won the competition to redesign the nickel. His depiction of President Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and Monticello Jefferson's home on the reverse became one of the longest-serving coin designs in United States history, and by the time we reached 1968, the design was already 3 decades old, but the world around it had shifted in dramatic ways. The 1960s were marked by the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, the space race, and the Cultural Revolution that was reshaping America. And in this context, the coins that circulated daily carried with them an air of stability and tradition. Even as society was changing rapidly in 1968, the United States Mint was operating under new realities. The Coinage Act of 1965 had removed silver from circulating dimes and quarters and reduced the silver content of the half-dollar. This was done to combat a nationwide coin shortage that had been aggravated by the rising value of silver and the increasing practice of hoarding coins as bullion. The nickel, however, remained unchanged in composition. It was still a copper-nickel alloy consisting of 75% copper and 25% nickel, weighing 5 grams and measuring 21.2 millimeters in diameter. The stability in the nickel was Important because it gave the mint one denomination that was not directly affected by the removal of silver. It became a steady workhorse of commerce. The year 1968 was also important because the mint mark returned to American coinage for the first time since 1965. During the height of the coin shortage, mint marks had been removed as a temporary measure to discourage collectors from removing coins from circulation. But in 1968, the mint reinstated mint marks and also shifted their placement on the Jefferson nickel, moving them from the right of Monticello on the reverse to just below the date on the obverse. This change in location is critical for collectors today because it allows them to distinguish between nickels of earlier periods and those of 1968 onward. This means a 1968 Jefferson nickel with a D for Denver or an S for San Francisco under the date carries a clear historical marker of this return to normal minting practice. Speaking of mints, the 1968 Jefferson nickel was struck at multiple facilities. The Philadelphia Mint produced coins without a mint mark, as was tradition. The Denver Mint struck large quantities marked with a D, and the San Francisco Mint struck coins bearing an S mint mark. But here lies a fascinating detail. While Philadelphia and Denver struck circulation coins, the San Francisco Mint was transitioning into becoming the primary producer of proof coins. Beginning in 1968, all United States proof coinage came exclusively from San Francisco. This means that the 1968's proof Jefferson nickel holds a unique place in American numismatic history as the beginning of San Francisco's exclusive role in proof production. Collectors treasure these coins because they mark a turning point in minting operations. The proof nickels of 1968 show the craftsmanship of the mint at its best. The deep mirror surfaces, the sharp strikes, and the frosted devices stand in stark contrast to the circulation strikes from Philadelphia and Denver. The coins were packaged in hard plastic cases known as proof sets, which made them more durable and appealing to collectors. This was also part of a broader effort by the mint to encourage coin collecting as a legitimate hobby during a time when hoarding and speculation had threatened the availability of coins for commerce. The proof coins gave Americans a way to appreciate numismatics without disrupting circulation. In terms of design, the 1968 Jefferson nickel kept Felix Schlag's original vision. Though there had been minor modifications over the years, Jefferson's portrait remained a left-facing bust with the motto "In God We Trust" along the left rim, liberty, and the date along the right rim. And now, beginning in 1968, the mint mark under the date on the reverse Monticello stood proudly with the motto Pluribus Unum above it. Monticello centered with the denomination 5 cents and the legend United States of America below. While simple in layout, this design endured because of its balance and because Jefferson as a figure resonated deeply with the American people. He was the author of the Declaration of Independence, a founding father, and the third president of the United States, so having his image on a coin during a time of national questioning and upheaval offered a reminder of democratic ideals and continuity. In examining 1968 nickels today, collectors pay close attention to condition, strike, and mintmark placement. High-grade examples, particularly those with full steps on Monticello's staircase, are rare and desirable. The term full steps refers to the clarity of the detail on the steps leading to Monticello on the reverse of the coin. In circulation strikes, it is difficult to find all steps fully struck without weakness, or where so coins that display full steps are far scarcer and command significant premiums. The Denver Mint in 1968 is especially notorious for producing coins with weaker strikes, making full step examples even more elusive. Looking deeper into mintage numbers, we see that the Philadelphia Mint produced over 160 million nickels, the Denver Mint struck more than 91 million, while the San Francisco Mint produced over 100 million nickels for circulation in addition to proof coins. So the total output was vast. Yet, even within such high mintages, rarity arises not from how many coins were struck, but from how many survive in pristine condition or with desirable strike characteristics. This is why modern grading services play such an important role today. Professional grading allows collectors to distinguish between ordinary circulated examples worth face value and superb gem specimens that can sell for significant sums at auctions. Economic climate of 1968 also influenced how these coins circulated. Inflation was a growing concern. The United States was still deeply engaged in Vietnam, and government spending was high. Coins such as the Jefferson nickel became essential to daily transactions. Vending machines, parking meters, and small purchases all relied heavily on the nickel, and because of this the wear and tear on these coins was immense, which further explains why finding high-grade survivors is such a challenge. Culturally, the 1968 Jefferson nickel sits in the pockets of Americans during one of the most eventful years in modern history. It was the year of the Tet Offensive in Vietnam, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Senator Robert F. Kennedy, the violent protests at the Democratic National Convention, and the election of Richard Nixon. In such a year of unrest, the stability of coinage seems almost ironic, yet coins like the nickel were one of the few constants in everyday life. They passed through the hands of citizens, no matter their background, beliefs, or struggles, serving as a unifying symbol of the economy. From a collector's perspective today, the 1968 Jefferson nickel offers multiple paths of interest. Casual collectors may enjoy finding examples from circulation or from old jars of change. More advanced collectors pursue high-grade mint state coins certified by grading services, with a special focus on those coveted full-step designations. Proof collectors seek out the 1968's issues for their beauty and historical significance, and variety specialists even search for small differences in dyes and strikes that can make particular examples stand out in rarity. The world of numismatics is filled with these layers of value, both monetary and historical. The legacy of the 1968 Jefferson nickel is therefore multifaceted. It represents continuity in design during a time of change. It marks the return of mintmarks and the shift of proof coinage to San Francisco. It stands as a product of mass mintage, but also as a treasure when found in perfect form, and it connects directly to one of the most dramatic years in American history, making it more than just a nickel, but rather a storyteller of its own time. When collectors and historians hold this coin, they are not merely examining copper-nickel alloy, they are holding the everyday companion of millions of Americans who lived through the challenges and transformations of the late 1960s. In the year 1971, the United States was standing at the edge of great economic and cultural transitions, and in that period of time a small coin that many people carried in their pockets, the Roosevelt dime, quietly represented not just currency, but also history, patriotism, and the legacy of a president whose leadership during a national crisis had permanently shaped the nation. When we begin to understand the dime of 1971, we must first recognize the man honored on its obverse, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, who guided the nation through the Great Depression with the New Deal programs, and later led the country through most of the Second World War. Roosevelt was not only a political leader, but also a figure of hope for millions of Americans who endured poverty and hardship. His image on the dime was chosen in 1946, the year after his death, not only as a way to honor his service, but also because of his close association with the March of Dimes, an initiative that helped fight polio, a disease that Roosevelt himself had suffered from his personal battle with illness, became a symbol of resilience and inspired countless citizens to contribute to medical research and to protect public health. So when people held a dime, they were not just holding money, they were holding a small reminder of Roosevelt's lasting influence on American society. By the year 1971, the Roosevelt dime had already been in circulation for 25 years since its introduction in 1946. But the coin had undergone major transformations in that time period. Originally minted in 90% silver, the dime reflected America's long tradition of using precious metals in coinage. However, in the mid-1960s, a worldwide shortage of silver combined with rising costs forced the United States Mint to take a historic step away from silver coinage. Beginning in 1965, the dime was produced in a clad composition of copper and nickel, giving the coin a silvery appearance without containing precious silver, so the 1971 Roosevelt dime belongs to this new era of clad coinage, an era that represented practicality, cost efficiency, and adaptation to modern economic reality. 1971 dime was struck at three major minting facilities: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint, each producing millions of coins. Philadelphia, as usual, produced coins without a mint mark, while Denver coins bore the familiar D mint mark, and San Francisco focused largely on proof coinage, which carried the S mint mark. The proof dimes of that year were not intended for circulation, but for collectors who prize their deep mirrored fields and frosted designs. Proof coins of 1971 were part of sets sold by the mint, and these coins today carry collector value far above their face value because of their craftsmanship and limited numbers. When studying the details of the 1971 Roosevelt dime, we notice that the obverse presents a left-facing profile of President Roosevelt. The word liberty appears to his left. The national motto, "In God We Trust," is situated beneath his chin, and the date 1971 rests to the lower right of the portrait. The designer's initials, J.S., representing John R. Sinek, the chief engraver of the United States Mint, appear at the truncation of the portrait. On the reverse, we see the torch of liberty at the center, flanked by an olive branch symbolizing peace on the left and an oak branch symbolizing strength on the right. The inscriptions United States of America, one dime, and e pluribus unum, meaning out of many one, complete the design. The symbolism gave the dime more than just monetary worth. It stood as a piece of national identity. Production quality of 1971 dimes varied, as was common in high mintage years with billions of coins struck. Many examples entered circulation with weak strikes, bag marks, and wear, but collectors and numismatists today prize those examples that display strong strikes, sharp details, and attractive luster. In particular, coins that survived in mint state condition, or those graded highly by professional services, such as Ms. 65 or higher, are considered desirable. The clad coinage of this period also tended to show toning over time and attract collectors who value unique color patterns, whether gold, blue, or rainbow tonus. Economically, the year 1971 was significant because it was the same year President Richard Nixon took the United States off the gold standard in what became known as the Nixon shock. This decision marked the end of the Bretton Woods system and ushered in an era of fiat currency where the value of money was not backed by precious metals, but by the strength and credibility of the U.S. government. In that context, the 1971 dime becomes even more symbolic. It represents the nation's shift away from traditional metal-backed money into a modern economy where coinage was primarily functional rather than a store of intrinsic value. For collectors today, the 1971 dime may seem ordinary because of its abundance, but it is precisely the ordinary nature of these coins that makes their survival in pristine condition extraordinary. Millions were spent, lost, damaged, or worn away. So when we find a brilliant uncirculated specimen with original mint luster intact, it tells us a story of survival across more than 50 years. Error coins of this year, also highly sought after, misstrikes, double dies, off-center strikes, and clipped planchets occasionally left the mint, and today, such varieties can command significant premiums, especially when authenticated and graded by professional services. The proof dimes from the San Francisco Mint hold an important place in this narrative. With their sharp frosted devices and mirrored fields, these coins were minted with extra care and handled under controlled conditions. Proof coins not only provided beauty for collectors, but also stood as examples of mint craftsmanship. They embody the artistry of coinage and the precision required to create small metallic works of art. When we explore the historical value of the 1971 dime, we must not overlook its role in everyday American life. For millions of people, this coin paid for phone calls, bus fares, newspapers, and small items at the corner store. It was the kind of coin that passed unnoticed in transactions, yet it was indispensable for daily living. Its small size made it easy to carry, and its purchasing power in 1971 was still meaningful compared to today. By studying it, we are reminded of how inflation and economic change altered the role of money over time. What a dime could buy in May 1971 cost dollars today, making the dime both a historical artifact and a lesson in economic history. As time passes, coins such as the 1971 dime become valuable not only for their metal or rarity, but for the history they carry. Each dime minted that year is a frozen moment from the past, linking us back to the culture, politics, and economy of early 1970s America. Roosevelt's portrait reminds us of leadership in adversity. The torch and branches remind us of liberty, peace, and strength. And the coin as a whole reminds us that money is more than a tool of commerce. It is also a record of national value. So, when you look at a Roosevelt dime dated 1971, you are not simply holding 10 cents, you are holding a piece of American history, a link between the legacy of a president, the struggles of a nation, the transformation of coinage away from silver, and the realities of an evolving economy. The dime is small, but its story is vast and layered. And for collectors, historians, and everyday citizens, it remains one of the most enduring and symbolic coins of the United States. Imagine holding in your hand a small coin no larger than the size of a fingertip, a coin that passes through the daily routines of millions of Americans, yet carries with it a story of history, economics, design, artistry, and value beyond its face. Worth the 1972 Roosevelt dime is one such piece. It is not just a 10-cent coin, it is a reflection of a nation in transition, a piece of metal that embodies both heritage and modernity, and a continuation of one of the most respected coin series in American history. To truly understand this dime, you must journey back through the history of the Roosevelt series, its origins, its role in American life, and the unique features of the year 1972, which gave birth to the dime in question. Roosevelt dime was first minted in 1946 as a tribute to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had passed away in 1945. Roosevelt was not only the nation's leader during the Great Depression and the Second World War, but he was also closely associated with the March of Dimes, an initiative to fight polio, a disease he himself had battled. With his personal struggle and his political leadership, it was only fitting that his profile should grace the dime, the smallest denomination that Americans use daily, yet one carrying the biggest symbolic connection to his legacy. When we move forward to 1972, we step into a United States that was experiencing significant change both politically and socially. The Vietnam War was ongoing, the Watergate scandal was about to unfold, inflation was beginning to pressure the economy, and the mint itself was facing challenges with coin production, as the country had already transitioned away from silver coinage just a few years earlier. By 1971, the last circulating silver coins had disappeared, replaced fully with copper nickel-clad coinage. The 1972 Roosevelt dime is part of this new era. It contains no silver. It is composed of a copper core with an outer layer of copper nickel, giving it durability and a bright silvery appearance. But unlike its pre-1965 counterparts, it held no intrinsic metal value above face. This was the reality of modern coinage. The design of the 1972 dime continued to follow John R. Sinek's original portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse, his dignified bust facing left, with the word liberty prominently displayed to his left, and the motto "In God We Trust" below his chin. The date 1972 rests to the right, while the mint mark, when present, appears near the base of Roosevelt's neck. Sinek's initials, JS, also appear subtly at the truncation of the portrait, which sparked some controversy in the late 1940s as critics mistakenly believed the letters stood for Joseph Stalin, a reflection of the paranoia of the Cold War era. Yet, by 1972, that controversy had faded into history. On the reverse, the familiar torch of liberty stands at the center, flanked by an olive branch on the left symbolizing peace, and an oak branch on the right symbolizing strength and independence. The inscriptions "United States of America, One Dime" and "E Pluribus Unum" frame the design, making it a clean, balanced composition that has stood the test of time through decades of production. From a numismatic perspective, the 1972 dime is fascinating because it was minted in 3 different facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each producing millions of examples, but with differences that collectors today carefully study. Philadelphia coins carry no mint mark. Denver coins carry the D mint mark, and San Francisco produced proof coins with the S mint mark. The proofs were specially struck with polished dies and planchets, giving them mirror-like surfaces and sharper details, and they were sold directly to collectors in proof sets rather than released for circulation. Product numbers were massive, with hundreds of millions struck for circulation, which makes the 1972 dime a common coin in most respects. Yet within these huge mintages exist varieties and errors that capture the attention of dedicated collectors. Off-center strikes, double die obverses or reverses, weak strikes, and misaligned dies are examples of the kind of minting anomalies that can turn an ordinary dime into a valuable treasure. In fact, some 1972 proof dimes show deep cameo contrast with frosted design elements against brilliant fields, making them highly sought after by collectors. The context of 1972 in coin collecting is also worth noting. This was a time when Americans had already started looking more closely at their pocket change in search of rare coins. Since the great coin shortage of the early 1960s and the switch away from silver, there was a surge of public interest in numismatics. The government had stopped producing silver dimes after 1964, but many people still hoarded pre-65 dimes, quarters, and half dollars for their silver content. The 1972 dime represented the new normal of fiat-based coinage, valuable not for its metal, but for its place in commerce. And as a collectible when preserved in high grade culturally, the dime of this period was deeply embedded in American life. It was a coin that children used to buy candy from corner stores, that people dropped into payphones to call loved ones, that laundromats and vending machines demanded as a standard unit of exchange, and that commuters used daily in parking meters. The dime was not just money, it was a coin of everyday survival, a bridge between the small conveniences of life and the larger economic currents of the nation. The fact that it carried Roosevelt's image gave it even more symbolic weight, tying the daily struggles of ordinary Americans to the memory of a president who had led them through some of the hardest chapters of the 20th century. Over time, the 1972 Roosevelt dime has become a subject of interest, not because of rarity in circulation, but because it represents a stable continuity in design and production. The coin is still in circulation today, though often worn down from decades of use. For collectors, however, condition is everything. A dime from 1972, found in mint state with full torch lines on the reverse, meaning the horizontal lines of the torch are fully struck, can command much higher prices than a worn example. Coins graded by professional services at the highest levels can reach values well above their face worth, showing how condition, rarity, and collector demand intersect in the world of numismatics. When we stretch this perspective over the course of 2 hours, we can examine in detail the historical forces that shape this coin, the artistic background of John Arsenic, the technological processes at the mints in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, the cultural role of the dime in American life, the collector demand for proof coins, cameo examples, and error varieties, and the economic realities of coinage in a post-silver era. Each of these aspects adds a layer of depth, making the 1972 dime not just a 10-cent coin but a window into the economic, social, and political landscape of America. At the Tomato conclude, the 1972 Roosevelt dime is more than a date in a series, it is a story of legacy. It is the continuation of Roosevelt's memory on the nation's coinage. It is a product of a time when America was redefining itself in money, politics, and culture, and it is a collectible that still draws attention today. For those who hold it in their hands, it is a reminder that even the smallest coins carry the largest stories, and within their metal rests the history of a nation.